Hi, this is Chris Kalinda, founder of the Strategic Leaders Academy. Now, I'm a leadership expert who specializes in helping CISOs and cybersecurity leaders improve their performance, slash employee burnout and turnover, boost employee engagement, and eliminate expensive mistakes. So I focus on CISOs and cybersecurity leaders because you are serving on a new frontier of freedom. So back in the Cold War, I served on the old East-West German border to protect our country and our way of life against the Soviet threat. So back then we called it the frontier of freedom. So you're serving on a new frontier of freedom, protecting our privacy, our livelihoods, our businesses, and our way of life against a range of insidious threats and lowlifes. So lone wolf hackers, organized crime, government and government-sponsored proxies, and of course, insider threats. So look, we need you to succeed. So helping you get the big things right, leadership, culture, and strategy is how I can do my part for your success. Okay, so today's focus is on getting great results the right way. And we're going to do that by mastering the three core principles of leadership: trustworthiness, respect, and stewardship. So I'm going to share my screen. All right, there we go, and move this puppy down. All right, so I'm scripting this, as you might have guessed, because I respect your time and I want to get the content across to you as efficiently as possible so you can get back to the fight. Okay, let's get rocking. So here is the big question. Do your employees trust you and respect you? How do you know? How about your boss, and how about your colleagues? Now, certainly nearly all leaders see themselves as being trustworthy. I mean, after all, it's part of our nature to see ourselves in a favorable light. But how do our employees and our leaders and our peers really feel? Well, it can be hard to tell for sure. So it's like looking through a camouflage net. You see some things clearly, most things are obscured, and people use the camouflage to show you what they want you to see and hide what they want to keep hidden. So leaders who believe that they are seeing objective reality are fooling themselves. And this inability for leaders to see themselves in their organization, these blind spots, are a shortcut to failure. So Nobel Prize winner Daniel Kahneman said, quote, "We are blind to our own blindness." And that is absolutely true for most leaders. So the good news is that there are some tried and true indicators of trust. The most powerful one is when people are willing to provide you with critical feedback and not worry about getting their heads lopped off or losing their jobs. So take a moment to think about it. Do you get that kind of feedback from your employees consistently? Or do you get the positive reinforcement and the safe negatives? Safe negatives being they heard your boss complain about something, they heard you complain about something, and then they come back to you and complain about that same thing. That's a safe negative because they already know that you don't like it. So do you get positive and safe negatives only when you ask for feedback? Do you not ask for feedback at all? Or do you get the very candid feedback where people are willing to tell you that the emperor is not wearing any clothes? So a culture of trust keeps employees engaged in productivity rather than politics and backbiting and gossip and other sort of foolishness, reduces burnout and turnover among your team, and helps you avoid very expensive mistakes. So these are the kind of things that we're going to discuss today. Okay, so here is our game plan. We're going to talk about the three core principles of leadership: trustworthiness, respect, and stewardship. These are the foundations of leading well. Remember last time we talked about how leaders lead? Now we're getting into how well leaders lead. So next, we're going to offer some brief case studies to show these principles in action. Third, we're going to discuss 5 key shifts that you can make right now to apply these principles at work and see an immediate boost. Fourth, we're going to identify some key data points and costs associated with low trust environments. And finally, if you loved what you heard today and want to find ways to work together I'll show you the impact that we've had with others and how to begin the process of working together. Okay, so rules of engagement. As always, please keep your microphones on mute. Use the chat room for questions or comments, and our COO, Nicole Kaus, is monitoring the chat room to flag me when there are questions and comments. So if you're viewing this on the recorded version, just type your comments and questions in the chat box on the right-hand side of the screen, and we will get you answers right away. That screen goes, bam, immediately to my email inbox, and I will get you an answer quickly. Of course, we have a strict no jerks rule. Disagreement is fine, but disagreement should not equal disrespect. Any disrespectful conduct, on the other hand, towards others will result in you being removed from the webinar. Okay, let's get rolling. All right, so you are in the right place if you are a leader, especially a CISO or cybersecurity leader who wants to lead well. If you want to make a positive impact on your mission and on your employees, and you are coachable and willing to learn. So if that sounds like you are in exactly the right spot. So my own leadership evolution. So I come to this intellectual content and this wide range of intellectual content through the school of hard knocks and hard study. So, hey, as a leader, I've been far from perfect, and there are times when I wasn't even very good. I went through various sort of toxic phases, being a loudmouth jerk, being a copycat to others, suffering from a crisis in confidence after being in an abusive environment. I've also managed to create self-inflicted damage that undermined trust in me. I have failed more times than I can count. But you know what? I learned from my mistakes, and I also made it a point to make new mistakes rather than just simply repeat old ones. And I also prefer to learn from others. So voracious reading about leadership theory and philosophy, the history of great leaders and organizations, and the thoughts of contemporary leaders are all great ways to study leadership. And in fact, that's exactly how I organized my first book, Leadership, the Warrior's Art. And over 50,000 people have now are reading that and counting, 50,000 counting, are using that for their professional development programs. I'm still amazed, quite frankly. The book is now going into a second edition, woo! And also, I've also learned extensively from a lot of mentors and a lot of coaches. So the bottom line is, I'm hoping that my long and painful road will be your shortcut to success. Okay, so imagine how you would feel if there were greater trustworthiness and respect at your place of work. So go ahead, type in the chat how your life would be different, how your work life would be different if there was greater trust and respect. Go ahead. Okay, good. Productive, energizing, psychological safety. That's a good one. Better performance, happiness. All right, excellent. Well, let's see a client testimonial of somebody who had this revolution after working with us. Quote, according to Jim Thaden, quote, "We faced major problems. Revenues were in free fall. Employees were pulling in different directions. There was a little integration and no progress. Thanks to Chris's support, our management and governance are now highly integrated. We have very high degrees of engagement, accountability, and ownership. His experience, knowledge, and sensitivity led to a strategy that has created $2 million in new annual revenues." That's $2 million in new revenues each year, and that's been going on for the past 5 years. Thank you, Jim Thaden. So let's talk about the 3 core principles of leadership. You hear a lot of things about leadership. Bottom line is there are 3 core principles to leading well, and that is trustworthiness, respect, and stewardship. So forget for a moment all the tactical suggestions you hear. You got to use social media, you got to use blogs, town halls, sensing sessions, various time management tools, nudges, tipping points, habits, outliers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, these can all be very important, but they can amplify, but they cannot replace these 3 core principles: trustworthiness, respect, and stewardship. And you know what? I personally guarantee you that if you earn people's trust If you treat them with respect and you're a good steward of your team and your organization, then you're going to be the kind of leader that people want to follow. And you're going to bring out the best in others, and you will be successful consistently. Okay, so trustworthiness, when you break the word down, means to be worthy of trust. In other words, it is your responsibility to earn the trust of your employees, your leaders, your peers, and not their responsibility to trust you. You have to earn that. So what makes a person worthy of trust? Well, the ancient Greeks and Romans, some people who wrote some of the best stuff on leadership, as well as the ancient Chinese, hit upon the exact same answer. So this is all happening around somewhere between 200 and 800 BC, and they're all arriving at the same answer about trustworthiness. So the Greeks, like Aristotle, who's pictured here, called it arete, or excellence, which is a combination of competence and character. So competence is competence meant that leaders were good at their tactical and technical skills. They could speak, they could persuade, they had the ability to set goals, develop strategies and plans, make decisions, and learn and adapt. So part of one half of that is about your skills. And, you know, Aristotle was the mentor of Alexander the Great. And he taught Alexander the Great what it meant to be trustworthy. And the Greeks followed Alexander the Great from Greece all the way to India as he conquered much of the known world starting in about 333-ish BC. And of course, Alexander's people began to leave him or resist against further conquests when they began to lose trust in him. So if you want to learn more about that, I've got a chapter on Alexander's leadership in my book, Leadership, The Warrior's Art. So competence is one half of it, your ability to do your job, to make decisions, to learn and adapt. And the other half is character. And that was expressed in what the ancient Greek and Roman Stoics called the 4 cardinal virtues: wisdom, courage, justice, and moderation or self-discipline. And many of the Greek histories, tragedies, philosophies center on the importance of arete. So Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, the plays of Aeschylus and Sophocles, Plutarch's Lives, Plato's Republic, Cicero's On Moral Obligations, all of these extraordinary works of literature that talk about leadership, all focus, Sun Tzu's Art of War, all focus on the centrality of trustworthiness. Hey, look, it's ancient wisdom that never grows old. Respect. So respect is the conviction that every member of the human race has inherent dignity and value, and thus deserves to be treated with fairness and equality. So let's turn again to the ancients. Sun Tzu, the ancient Chinese military theorist, tells leaders to, quote, command with civility, give sound instructions that create good results, and enforce standards uniformly, i.e. no favoritism, end quote. What he's talking about is treating people with respect. So the ancients, of course, had their own contradictions and their hypocrisies. Many ancient societies had slaves. They made frequent use of capital punishment and torture, were often misogynistic, had many, many, many other issues. The philosophers, though, were quite observant about good leadership and often wrote about it, and were often writing about leadership as it ought to be, not necessarily as it was practiced by various people. You know, one of the greatest examples of respect in my life has been this gentleman pictured here, General Stanley McChrystal. So in 2009, McChrystal had just been selected to command all of the international forces in Afghanistan. So it's a 4-star command. He's a 4-star general. I was a lowly colonel. And I just come back from Afghanistan from a command there, and he asked me to talk with him about what was going on. So I seized upon this opportunity to tell him some things that he probably didn't want to hear, to include that the war wasn't going well and special force or civilian casualties from special forces raids, he had previously been a special forces commander, were turning people towards the Taliban and away from us and the government, and were doing great harm to our legitimacy and prospects of success. So I also offered some ways to correct these and other problems. Now, what I noticed during this meeting was that McChrystal looked directly at me the entire time. He didn't try to multitask. He wasn't, looking at a smartphone while pretending to listen to me. He wasn't reading memos and newspapers and stuff like that as if he had something more important to do. He didn't have aides coming whispering in his ear while we were talking. He was laser focused on me the entire time. So, of course, no good deed goes unpunished. He asked me to go to Afghanistan with him. And there I noticed that he treated everybody the exact same way. Didn't matter if you were a general or a colonel or a captain or a private. Didn't matter if you were an American or Afghan or German or Italian or Georgian or other nationality, male, female. Didn't matter whether you were a soldier, an aid worker, a diplomat, or somebody cleaning the facilities at the headquarters. Whenever anybody talked with General McChrystal, they had his undivided attention. And it's a lesson in respect I will never forget. So look, everyone and everyone's job matters. Their contributions might be different, but they all matter. And respect means you treat people like they matter, and it's transformational. Okay, so take a moment and think about this. In the chat box, write who you respect more, leaders who are focused like McChrystal or multitaskers who do something else while they're talking to you. So type F for focused and MT for multitaskers. Which one do you respect more? So yeah, just go ahead and start cranking that into the chat room. Of course, it's all Fs, F, 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 F. So it makes a difference to all of us, whether somebody treats us with respect or not. All right, now the third principle is stewardship. So stewardship is the intention to create durable excellence in your people, teams, and your organizations. And this is the opposite of just simply wringing people dry, burning them out, and exhausting the organization for short-term results, which we see a lot of people, quite frankly, do. So stewardship means that you learn how to bring out the best in your employees, your teams, and the organization, and that you leave them stronger, fitter, and more capable than where you found them. So if you lead them to durable excellence and sustainable success, not a one and done, flash in a pan, see you later sort of nonsense. Stewardship is sustainable excellence. So going back to General McChrystal, he says that leaders must be like gardeners. They cultivate their people, their teams, their organizations to be the best and healthiest possible versions of themselves. So when it comes to people and teams, gardeners recognize that people are different and that they contribute in different ways. They don't try to turn tomatoes into cucumbers or peppers or onions. They cultivate each one to be the best version of itself. So our ebook and webinar, Build Winning Teams, walks you step by step through this process. So regarding the organization as a whole, good stewardship means to make it more durably successful than it was before. All right, so let's check on a few case studies. Normandy, one of my personal favorites. General Dwight Eisenhower, pictured here on the left, deliberately cultivated trust with his political leaders, his generals, and his troops. Eisenhower earned their trust because of his character and his competence, his vision and his strategies, and his ability to make decisions and communicate those effectively and bring all of them along the way. So Eisenhower was very candid in his assessments, even to the point of being blunt. When he disagreed with a decision, he carefully marshaled the facts and he argued his position. When decisions didn't go his way, he executed them without quibbling, without slow rolling, or without deception. So when an issue threatened to cross a red line for him, he made clear his willingness to step down. So one example was a controversy over control of the air forces for the Normandy invasion. Eisenhower said he could not in good conscience lead the invasion if he could not ensure a reasonable chance of success, which to him centered on focusing the power of the air forces on supporting the landings rather than a strategic bombing campaign in Germany. So he won the argument, and people respected his approach. His sense of self-worth was not tied to his position. He also treated people with respect regardless of rank or position, or to the extent in which he agreed with them. When arguments came up, Eisenhower always listened carefully, gave people his undivided attention. And in this way, he brought out the best ideas, the best innovations, and feedback from his team. And Eisenhower was always very careful to communicate in ways that would resonate most with his audience. He took time to see issues from their point of view and begin the communication from there. So his trustworthiness kept a potentially fractious coalition together through the planning and execution of D-Day, the difficulties of Operation Market Garden, and the Battle of the Bulge, all the way through to the defeat of Nazi Germany. Okay, of course, by contrast is Uber. So Uber was one of those rare unicorn startups, had a record $68 billion valuation in 2015. They were rocking the free world. This is the highest valuation that any startup has achieved in the history of business. However, between 2016 and 2017, Uber hit a wall. The company incurred $2.8 billion in losses in 2016, which widened to $4.5 billion in 2017. So Uber's problems, insiders report, stemmed from a pervasive sexist culture, or stemmed from a pervasive sexist culture and lack of workplace respect, which then created high employee turnover, a series of very public revelations, and of course, those led to a lot of scandals and questioning about what exactly was going on at Uber. So for Uber, a lack of trustworthiness and respectful leadership at the top translated into declining revenues and lost reputation. And these problems, of course, resulted in co-founder and CEO Travis Kalanick being fired as CEO. A lot of leaders left in droves, and that toxic environment and the fallout cost the company $35 billion in valuation. You know, tolerating toxic leaders might have some sort of short-term benefit, might grow the bottom line in the short term, but in the long term, it is always a train wreck. Tolerating toxic leaders like that is always going to lead to major problems. Client testimonial. So Chris's trainings are an exceptional opportunity to empower your team to accomplish more. Our providers love the blend of historical examples and practical lessons for today. His sincerity and authenticity captivated everyone. We are seeing at least a 50% improvement in levels of ownership and engagement, and our conversion numbers have increased by 15%, bringing more revenue into the company. Stephen McFarland, Vice President of Aspire. Thanks, Stephen. All right, so let's get into 4 shifts. So what are some ways to improve trustworthiness, respect, and stewardship and get after it right away? Well, we're going to show you 4 shifts that you can make right now that won't cost you a penny, but will automatically, immediately boost your trustworthiness, respect, and stewardship, help you get even better results than you're getting now. So as we go through these, the best way to get the most from this webinar is to watch it live and then watch it on playback with your team. Pause after we talk about each shift, and then work with your team to create an action plan to put these steps into practice right away. All right, let's get into shift number 1. We're going to move from a focus on talent to a focus on trust. So everyone talks about the importance of talent. And of course, everybody wants the A players, the elite talent, the top 5 or top 10%. But guess what? That is mathematically impossible. Most normal organizations get average to above average talent. And you're going to wind up with some below average talent too, even as hard as you work to not have that. It's just the law of averages. So, but what none of the talent worshipers talk about is the impact of toxic talent. Now, I see this in the NFL teams that I work with all the time. Some players with the highest levels of natural talent can be the most toxic. And highly talented toxic people have an outsized negative effect on the team overall. And they drag a lot of people down with them. The result is a lot of losing. So take a look at this chart I put together for an NFL team that I do some work with. Your highly talented but low trust employees are the toxic ones. So you've got the sort of north-south axis is levels of trust. The east-west axis is, I'll reveal this here in a second, is talent. And so when you've got a situation where you have highly talented players, you see on the right, but low levels of trust, these are your toxic players. And what they do is they drag the team down. So you're highly talented, those are the toxic ones. You're much better off with moderately talented, high trust people because they contribute to the team. So that is this group here, your role players, your moderately talented but high trust people. Your above average high trust people are your sort of Pro Bowl people, your players with a lot of team impact. And then on occasion, you're going to get the high trust, high talented player, and those are your Hall of Fame performers. So teams and companies are much better off hiring high trust people that have good enough skills, because these are the people who do their jobs well and elevate the performance of everyone around them. They help to create a positive, healthy work environment in which the focus is on performance rather than on politics. So developing skill, of course, in anything is much easier than trying to train somebody's or retrain somebody's character. So to begin hiring for trust, do these three things. First, define your values and expectations. Identify the key leader and employee behaviors and standards for each. Second, make these behaviors and standards explicit during the hiring process. Evaluate candidates on their fitness to follow these workplace rules. Hire high trust people that have sufficient skills and then boost their skills when they get on the job. This is the healthy and successful way to hire for culture without sacrificing diversity. Third, hold everyone equally accountable for upholding these standards. No favorite, no passes. Once you begin to excuse anyone, especially yourself, from these standards, it means your standards are arbitrary and your credibility is gone. So define your values and expectations. Make them explicit during the hiring process. Evaluate your candidates for fitness to follow those values and expectations. And then third, hold everybody, most importantly yourself, accountable to follow those rules. All right, so get this wrong, and you're going to continue to get mired in workplace drama and be surrounded by toxic employees. And here are some of the effects of that. If you make $20,000 per month and you spend 20% of each day dealing with drama, that's a cost of nearly $50,000 a year in lost productivity for you alone. A toxic work environment, according to a study from Michigan State University, costs an estimated $14,000 per affected employee each year. So if just 10 employees are affected by a toxic work environment, it's like tossing $140,000 right down the drain. You're also going to get higher rates of employee disengagement and turnover when you have one of these nasty environments, you get this wrong. The cost of employee turnover can range from 50% to 200% of the employee's annual salary. So losing 10 employees whose average salary is $100,000 a year means a $1 million loss for you. So get this right, on the other hand, move this back down, get this right, and you're going to have higher rates of employee engagement, which is going to make your workforce more productive and more efficient. You're going to experience a multiplier effect of having cohesive teams. Their overall performance is much greater than the sum of each individual's contribution. You're also going to be able to focus your personal energies on growth and strategy, things that actually grow your business and make you a great C-suite partner rather than being mired in drama and foolishness. And you're also going to have much higher retention of your best talent, which leads to greater cohesion, greater performance, greater impact. It becomes a virtuous cycle when you get this right, when you move from a focus on talent to a focus on trust. Okay, so Nicole's flagging me. We've got a question from Bob from New York. So Bob, we have a highly talented person who is a great technical expert. Everyone loved working with him. We promoted him to a management role, and now everybody hates him. What do we do? Wow, that's a great question, Bob, and it's something that organizations, of course, deal with all the time. There are lots of people with terrific technical skills who would love to focus on that for their entire career and not be in a management role at all. But sadly, our corporate culture has made climbing the ladder some sort of intrinsic good and marker of success. So we need to find better ways to help people gain a sense of fulfillment at work. On this particular issue, assuming that you want to retain this individual, you've got some good options. So first, you could refocus his role on a purely technical one, the ones in which he previously excelled. Create a position called a senior fellow to recognize excellence and consistent performance that rewards talented technicians who don't want to be leaders. Alternatively, you could provide leadership training and coaching if he's willing to commit himself to that. And third, you can provide training and move him to a different management role where he can get a fresh start. Okay, thank you. Great question from Bob. Let's move to shift number 2. There we go. Shift number 2 is from multitasking to full attention and laser focus. So this shift is about respect. So I'll call this the Stan McChrystal rule. Make a commitment to stop multitasking when you are interacting with people. Instead, make each person you interact with the exclusive 100% focus of your attention. So look, there's plenty of science that explains that multitasking is counterproductive when you're doing anything that requires some level of cognitive processing. Interacting with people face-to-face, by video, on the phone requires cognitive attention. And of course, there are huge benefits to doing this well. First, you're communicating that you respect the other person that you are with. This implies to one-on-one conversations, discussions, face-to-face meetings, etc. There should be nothing more important for you than at that time than what the other person or people are communicating. This simple action shows that you value them, you value their ideas and their contributions, and this is a great no-cost way to boost your employee engagement and commitment and their trust and respect in you. So I was with an NFL team recently during their practice and was watching how players treated the people who brought them water and Gatorade during breaks. Great indication of team culture. So the players on the defense always looked the staff in the eye and said thank you. Players on the offense, however, rarely did this. So guess which side of the football had a winning culture and which one had a toxic one? You know it. Second, your meetings are going to be a lot shorter and more productive when everyone is focused on paying attention to everyone else. Some teams have no phones have a no phones rule during meetings, no computer rule during meetings. So everybody's attention must be laser focused on one another. Third, you're going to have less workplace drama and more quality communication when people pay attention to one another. It's just a simple fact. You're going to have fewer disputes you have to referee, and that's going to free you for more productive uses of your time. So full attention reduces miscommunication, reduces drama, and reduces the amount of refereeing that you have to do. So implementing this, of course, is really simple. When somebody wants to talk to you, put down the phone, close the laptop, face the person, and look directly at them. If you need to finish a task, just politely ask the person to give you a minute to finish, and then once you're finished, give that person your full attention. As a leader, you can also set the example of this by modeling the behavior. Encourage your employees to say, quote, "Boss, let me finish this sentence and I will be 100% with you." And then respect that. So get this wrong, and your team is going to be mired in miscommunication, costing you hours of lost productivity, loads of rework, and oodles of frustration. Get this wrong, and you'll unwittingly encourage a low-respect, toxic environment that is going to undermine employee engagement and productivity. Get this wrong, and your meetings will be longer and less productive because everyone's attention is elsewhere. Get this wrong, and you'll spend a lot of time refereeing disputes, dealing with office politics and drama when you instead should be focused on strategy and growth. Get this right, on the other hand, you're going to have a workplace that practices respect for each employee, regardless of that person's role in the organization. Get this right, and you will have a clearer and more effective communications. Your meetings will be shorter, they'll be more productive, and less time consuming on everyone. Get this right, and you'll have more time and energy to focus on strategy, on growth, and on bringing out the best in your employees. So look, this is another low-cost, high-impact action that boosts the quality of your work environment. Highly talented, high-trust people are going to break down your doors to work with you because they know that you're going to value them and you're going to respect them. Let's move on to shift number 3, from lip service on stewardship to actual commitment. So this shift, of course, is about stewardship. Most leaders recognize intellectually the importance of professional development and providing their employees with opportunities for growth. They also recognize the importance of doing things like strategy, taking care of your organization, but only a handful put those thoughts into action. And the excuse for this is, well, we're just simply too busy. And yet, the best leaders and teams, people just as busy as any one of us are, always seem to find the time. So what are they doing differently, and what can we learn from them? Well, they know that if you let the little things run your life, you're never going to have time for the big things. Conversely, when you make time for the big things first, they know that the little things, they will always find time for the little things. So imagine you've got an empty bucket. So here we go on the left, empty bucket. Next to the bucket, you have a pile of rocks and a pile of sand. Now, if you poured all of that sand in first, it's going to fill up about half of that bucket. You're going to have room for only a few big rocks. Now, dump the sand out. If you put the rocks in first, you're going to be able to include all the rocks in that bucket. And then as you pour in the sand, you're going to notice that the sand works its way into all the nooks and crannies and crevices and open spaces. So by putting in the big rocks first, you have created the space for them, and you still have enough space for the sand. That would not happen, of course, if you put the sand in first. You've got to put the big rocks in first. All right, so what does it mean to us? Well, management expert Stephen Covey developed a time management model that breaks tasks down according to urgency and importance. So this quad chart represents these ideas. So the north-south axis depicts importance, so important tasks on the north, unimportant tasks on the south. And the east-west depicts urgency, so urgent on the left, non-urgent on the right. So quadrant number 1 represents the urgent and the important. And this is where most leaders spend their time. This is the sort of firefighting behavior. You've got to attend the fire or it's going to consume the house. Quadrant 2 is the important but not urgent. This category includes things like strategy, professional development, lessons learned, activities, etc. Employee professional development and counseling, feedback. If quadrant 1 was firefighting, then quadrant 2 is like fire prevention. The tasks are important, but they're just not urgent. The house isn't going to burn down if you don't do fire prevention. But doing those big things, doing the fire prevention, might help prevent the fire from getting ignited in the first place. So quadrant 3 is your urgent and unimportant stuff. This is the sort of pants on fire actions that make little difference in performance or outcomes. So email, social media notifications, chat rooms are superb ways to pile up urgent and unimportant tasks. Quadrant 4 represents the not urgent and unimportant. So these things are just simply a complete waste of time that accomplish nothing. So rumor mongering, playing video games, office politics, those sort of things, not urgent, unimportant, and drain your productivity. Excuse me. So let's return to the bucket analogy. So, let me go back. Quadrant 1 tasks are the sand, and quadrant 2 tasks, of course, are the rocks. If we set aside time in advance for the rocks, we get them in a bucket first, we're always going to find time for the sand. If we focus our time on the sand, however, we're not going to be able to fit in all the big rocks needed to actually be good stewards of our organizations and to grow sustainably. So this is a difference between a commitment and lip service on the big things. So how do we make time for the big rocks? Well, you've got to be very intentional. Put this idea into action using an annual, quarterly, monthly calendar template. So here's how you do that. Set aside time for your annual activities on your annual calendar first. What are the big things you want to make sure you get done each year? Could be like strategic planning, could be evaluations, and the like. Next, move to your quarterly events. So these could include things like board meetings and preparation, lessons learned discussion, action plans, and professional workshops. Then go to your monthly calendar and set aside time for monthly events like one-on-ones with your direct reports, on-site professional development, and other important meetings. And finally, you can also use a weekly calendar template that records the sort of meetings and other recurring events. Now, the neat thing is that you put all of this on the calendar with specific dates and times. And as a leader, you make sure that these are never compromised, ever. Because oftentimes the worst offenders are the leaders themselves. But once you have done this, what you've just done is not only make everybody's life very, very predictable, you've set aside time to get the big things done, you've also given your employees a ton of white space for their big rocks. And you have given them predictability over their time and over their energies. And one of the best ways to communicate that you respect your people is to respect their time. Okay, so get this wrong and you're going to be in a constant firefighting mode. It's exhausting. It will burn out you and your employees. You're going to be lurching from one crisis to another, never putting in the systems, the strategies, the professional development in place to ever improve your organization. You will have your hair on fire, your pants on fire. Get this wrong and you will have a much higher burnout rate among your senior leaders and among your most talented, engaged people. Get this wrong and you're going to have very difficult time retaining your most talented and trustworthy people. They are going to vote with their feet out your door and to different organizations. And they're going to find ones that respect their time and their energies. Get this right, on the other hand, and you're going to find that you start getting the big things right: leadership, culture, and strategy. And this means you have far less firefighting to do. So you actually reduce the amount of sand you got to pour in a bucket. That's kind of cool. Get this right, and you will have a learning organization that brings out the best in its people and its teams, that performs at a consistently high level and reduces the rate of burnout and disengagement. Get this right, and you're going to retain your high trust, high talented people and attract others to you. They're going to knock down their doors wanting to get onto your team. Okay, so we also had a question from Mary from Chicago. Mary said, I love this idea. The problem is that my boss who lacks this kind of discipline. So what do I do about that? Wow. And Mary raised an awesome question. Quite frankly, this happens a lot, and there's no silver bullet solution. We can't control the out of control boss. First, my advice is that first, keep the big rock discipline for your team as much as possible, even if it means you're not personally there. And oh, by the way, this is also going to help your direct reports grow when you put them in charge of these big rock things when you get pulled away. Second, if you've got a good relationship, let your boss know the impact of unpredictability on you and your team, that you're not able to be as present and as intentional for these big things that you want to be, and that this affects the business overall. And a lot of times bosses will listen, and they'll try to model your more disciplined behavior. Okay, so this leads to the next shift from passive to active feedback, shift number 4. So, hey, have you ever filled out one of those office feedback forms that want to get your views about how well things are running? Yep, we all have. And if you're like me and many others, you took a lot of time to fill this out for the first time. You had a lot of input and a lot of common sense ideas that you hoped would make things better. You proudly submitted your feedback, and then crickets. Nothing. You heard nothing. No substantive response from the management other than the automated, thank you for your submission. How did you feel when this happened? Go ahead, type it in the chat room. How did you feel when you took all that time to submit your feedback to an organization and all you got was, thank you for your service? Yep. Frustrated, waste of time, disrespected, frustrated, angry. Exactly. So imagine how your employees must feel if you do the same thing to them. So you might be thinking, well, I do act on the feedback. Okay, but how do your employees know that you're acting on the feedback? It's like letting the tree fall in the forest and hoping somebody hears it. So the key is to go from passive reaction to feedback, from ignoring or implementing changes quietly, to an active approach to the feedback, letting your team know that you heard them, responding in detail, and holding yourself and your leadership team accountable for changes. So here's what I mean. Very simple process. So step 1, provide a simple feedback mechanism that elicits responses on your key priorities and your issues. The more customized they are to you and your priorities and issues, the better it is. The general surveys are okay, but go for the customized ones. They're going to give you higher payoff. Step 2, gather the feedback and analyze it. Sort it into 3 categories. Category 1, what we're going to change now and how we're going to do it. Category 2, what we should change, but I need more resources, or it's out of my control. I need to talk to the boss. And then category 3 are the things that we cannot or will not change, and why. So communicate this very clearly to your employees. And as you're doing this, of course, look for causes of problems or issues. Do not go blame seeking or blame deflecting. I was talking with a prospective client just a couple days ago and talked to them about doing feedback. And the feedback that my client got from his direct reports was, oh my goodness, it's going to be used to single us out. We don't want feedback. It's like, oh, what kind of organization doesn't want feedback? But if you do it right, if there's trust in the system, where the feedback is not going to be used to assign blame, but to find causes and issues, then of course it's going to be much more effective. And this leads to step 3. Brief your entire team on the results and how you characterize their inputs. For everybody who had input into that system ought to be getting the direct feedback. And lay out the categorizations, category 1, category 2, category 3 to them, and respond to their questions and concerns. But once again, no blame game on this. Look for cause, not for blame. Step 4 is to develop action plans on each of the items you said you would change and brief the entire team on them. And for the biggest impact, of course, have your employees involved in creating the action plans for the things that they said they wanted to change. They're going to have much greater ownership and they're going to make it work. And finally, step 5, which is the money step. All right, this is the money step. In 90 days, deliver an audit of progress on the changes and action plans that you said you were going to make. What have we changed? What stuck and why, et cetera? What are we going to do from here? So this is you being accountable for your team for the changes that you said you would make. And if you repeat this 5-step process every 6 months, people are going to see you, when people see you responding so constructively to their feedback, the quality of their inputs is going to improve, which means the quality of your action is going to improve, which means the quality of your organization is going to improve. So they're going to be more likely to let you know about problems or issues because they know that your response is going to be constructive and is going to make things better. If you do this, it will transform your organization. Once again, it really doesn't cost a dime. So get this wrong and your team will hide hard truths while blowing sunshine up your backside. Get this wrong and your team will languish in performance far below their capabilities. Get this wrong and people will have a cynical approach to feedback and questionnaires. You're going to, it's the old problem, garbage in, garbage out. Get this right, on the other hand, and your team is going to trust you and respect you. Get this right, and your team is going to see you as a good steward of the organization, and so will your boss. Get this right, and your team is going to dramatically improve their performance, engagement, productivity, and commitment to the common good. And once again, you can do this at very little to no cost, and the payoff is huge. Here's what Colleen Creighton of AAS said. Chris's support helped us double employee engagement from roughly 40% to 80%, with significant impacts on increasing revenue and lowering costs. And Colleen is an absolute all-star at taking constructive feedback, applying it constructively, and working with her team to build action plans that take them to the next level. Well done, Colleen. Imagine the impact on your organization, doubling your employee engagement. Okay, now I know some of you heard me what I said. I talked about 5 shifts, and then I only gave you 4. You know it, you got a bonus shift. Here's shift number 5, going from your silo to their bus stop. And this is going to be a feeder for our next webinar, which is about empathy, which is your shortcut to cooperation. So look, it's quite normal for people to see situations and issues from their own perspective. And this is particularly true for organizations that might be very technical or very peculiaristic that other people in the organization don't understand. And those people in those peculiar or highly technical parts of the team can retreat into their silos and look out at everybody from the silo. So when this becomes a problem is when they use this point of view to interpret the views and incentives of others on a contentious issue. So what happens is that people tend to dig in their heels when the issue is contentious, and they tend to place added weight on data that confirms their point of view and to discount disconfirming data. Now, this is what's called confirmation bias. So silos reinforce confirmation bias. And rather than have an open mind, people simply entrench their position and the facts don't matter. And of course, it's very dangerous for a company, not to mention a country. And it creates major internal animosities, creates lots of gossip, lots of politicking, rumor mongering, and the like. And people begin working at cross purposes. So this problem can be particularly acute for people in unique specialties like cybersecurity. So the less you're understood, the more likely it is that you become a scapegoat when something goes wrong. The less you understand how others see you and their situations, the more likely it is that you do things or fail to do things that end up reinforcing their biases towards you. I have lived this dream, and perhaps so have many of you. So the key is to get out of your silo and go to their bus stop. Make a very deliberate effort to see the business and to see your team from their point of view. Understand their interests and their objectives, their fears and their concerns, and find ways to be a good partner. And you know what? When you can very clearly articulate what others see and believe about you and your team, when you can very clearly articulate your company's strategy, the incentives and challenges and obstacles that your peers face, and you can communicate it so clearly that a 5-year-old will understand it, that's when you know that you have gone to their bus stop and you have been able to see things from their point of view. Now, get this wrong, and you'll continue to be scapegoated for breaches in the system and for the owner's requirements that drag down profits and sales. So you're doing all the right things, helping improve the cybersecurity of your company, and people are going to blame you for being like a ball and chain, dragging down profit. Get this wrong, and you risk creating incentives for your colleagues to try to poach your employees, your budget, and your resources. Get this right, and you're quickly going to discover ways to help others get your way. Let me say that again. Get this right, and you'll quickly discover ways to help others get your way. Get this right, and you're going to reduce the likelihood that you're going to be scapegoated for problems that you don't control. Get this right, and you're going to reduce the risk that your colleagues see you as a feeding trough as they try to poach your talent and your budget. Get this right, and you're more likely to build bridges to your colleagues and be far more effective in creating commitment to cybersecurity rather than having them see cybersecurity as another onerous, annoying, ball and chain, growth-sucking compliance task. All right, look, here's the number one key above all else. Trustworthiness, respect, and stewardship are at the heart of good leadership. These are the foundations of leading well, and they are the substance over the style of leadership. Now, these three principles are going to help you create greater commitment to the common good, your vision, your mission, your goals, your values, your standards, and expectations. Now, as I communicated to an NFL team I work with, if you want to be awesome, AWESOME, notice that the we comes before me. Model this behavior and hire high trust, high content, or high talent people, and you're going to have a tremendous team. Avoid toxic talent at all costs. So imagine how you would feel if you had the trust and respect of your employees, your boss, and your C-suite colleagues. Imagine how you would feel if your employees solved problems on their own because they understood your common good, your mission, mission, goals, values, standards, and expectations. Imagine how you would feel if your employees were candid about the challenges they faced. Imagine how you would feel if you and your employees loved your feedback sessions because they saw the improvement and performance impact. Imagine how you would feel if you left a legacy of excellence in your people and organizations. People remembered you for decades for the positive impact that you had on them and on the organization. And your organization thrives and wins for years even after you left it. Imagine how you would feel with the increased employee engagement and commitment to the common good, empowered your cyber defense and resilience, saving your company many thousands of dollars or more. So go ahead, type in a chat room how you would feel when you get these things right: trustworthiness, respect, and stewardship. All right, the responses that we've seen: happy, gratified, fulfilled, awesome, awesome with the capital We and ME. Very cool, empowered, terrific. Thank you. All right, so here's some data points you need to know to really put an exclamation point on this. So sadly, this feeling that you just thought about is not the case for most leaders in most organizations. According to Gallup, 67% of Americans reported being unengaged at work. That is right. They're physically present, but not being productive. They're engaged in other stuff: politics, drama, gossip, social media, looking for other jobs, etc. Now, 75% of those who left their jobs voluntarily, who voted with their feet out of a company, report doing so to get away from their managers. And 89% of those who leave their jobs in the first 18 months do so because they're a bad culture fit. All right, so you get the picture. The average organization has huge rates of disengagement, mental absenteeism, turnover, and low trust in their leaders. And you guessed it, it directly affects your ability to deal with the cyber threat. And the cost of you and your team, to you and your team, are substantial. So these kind of problems: disengagement, low trust in leaders, damage performance, and inflict significant costs. So let's look at just 3 of them. So replacing an employee, according to Harvard Business Review, costs between 50% and 200% of the employee's annual salary. Workplace incivility, as we mentioned before, costs an average of $14,000 per affected employee. So let's say you lose 20 employees per year at an average annual salary of $100,000, and you have 20 additional employees affected by a toxic work environment. Let's also say that you and your 5 senior leaders devote 20% of your time to dealing with workplace drama and refereeing disputes. And to make the math easy, let's say that the average senior leader salary is about $250,000. That loss to you just alone is $50,000 per leader in lost productivity. That totals about $300,000. So here's the overall tally. The turnover alone is going to cost you about $2 million. The toxic work environment experienced by some of your team costs you a further $280,000 and another $300,000 in lost leader productivity. That's $2.58 million down the drain. If you recall the Capital One breach in 2019, in the year leading up to the breach, the Capital One cybersecurity team reportedly had a 33% turnover in that team. So imagine if their average salary was $100,000. That's a $3.3 million loss to that team just due to employee turnover, not to mention any other challenges. And had they invested even 10% of that, even 1% of that in helping their employees and doing some of these 5 shifts that we talked about, things might have been very different than the $150 billion loss Capital One suffered in 2019 alone. Now, in addition, there are probably major mission impacts to these kind of workplace challenges. Disengaged employees mean lower cyber vigilance, lower cyber hygiene, which increases the risk of penetration, breach, and compromise. A toxic work environment is also highly likely to increase the insider threat. And of course, workplace drama and politics that distracts you and your senior leaders means less attention to threat analysis, to strategy and decision-making, all of which heighten your risk, heighten the risk to your credibility and to the integrity of your company, your company's information systems. So look, the one thing to take away from today: you have got all you need to be an effective leader. It is inside your head and inside your heart. You can lead with trustworthiness, respect, and stewardship. I know because I've screwed these things up in the past and I've also gotten them right. So I know the difference. By leading with these core principles, you can reduce the kind of problems average organizations face significantly, save time, money, increase your productivity, and boost your credibility and effectiveness. Now, look, most leaders want to be viewed as trustworthy. They want to treat people with respect. They want to leave their organizations better than they found them. But the key to doing that, to actually doing it, rather than just wanting to actually doing it, is to translate those implicit intentions into explicit actions. And the 5 shifts that we discussed today give you great ways to do just that. And look, you can implement all of those 5 shifts at very little to no cost to you and a very high impact for your team. So you can lead with trustworthiness, respect, and stewardship without hiring expensive consulting firms, going to costly executive MBA programs, or engaging in goofy group hugs, falling backwards while people catch you, or weird boot camps. Of course, this is all your decision. What you do with this information, of course, is up to you. Now, some leaders are fine using trial and error. They like the school of hard knocks. Our free content gives you the big picture ideas that we've tried and a lot of tried and true habits to make major impact. And we roll out a new webinar every few weeks or so. So and we have online courses, so you can kind of learn at your own pace. You can use our free content. You can use some of our online courses. Now, most leaders, though, find that coaching, mentoring, and accountability are keys to rapid growth. And so that's kind of the fast track to goodness. And here's how that works. It's what we call our sustainable improvement model. So this, of course, combines basic learning pedagogy and common sense. So quick fixes, like falling backwards as people catch you, tend to have a very short shelf life, if at all. The same way with like one-off programs and presentations. Executive MBA programs provide a lot of good ideas to those who attend them, but their impact is often limited because people then return to the environment or return to an environment that hasn't changed. So they're unable to really apply these ideas effectively. So what you want, instead of sort of one-offs or sending people to executive MBA programs and stuff like that, what you want is sustainable improvement that makes a durable impact on your organization. And it's really a 5-step process. So the first is creating awareness and intention. So awareness of ideas and habits and technologies that can improve your organization's condition is a start. The leader also needs to have the intention to make specific improvements to the organization's condition. And that commitment to that intentionality, that commitment to improving certain aspects, the intention leads to step 2, which is knowledge and value transfer. Leaders seek knowledge about how to improve their organization's condition, select what they think's best, and then obtain that knowledge. So step 3 is where the change begins. The knowledge needs to be applied in the real world to the organization. That's why one-off events are not as effective. What you need to do is create action plans. So you begin to institutionalize that learning. Now, plans, of course, mean nothing unless they are implemented properly. So step 4 is accountability. Who is helping your team implement? Who is holding people's feet to the fire? Who's holding them accountable? Who's helping you be accountable? So you've got tons on the plate. So having an accountability partner who is on the same page as you, as your best interest in mind, makes a huge difference. So quality implementation accountability, of course, creates new habits in the organization. That's step 5. And those habits become sustainable because people see the real tangible impact on performance and on the organization's condition. And these new habits and better performance lead to more awareness of ways to improve the organization's condition, and it essentially becomes a virtuous cycle. So this is exactly how we help organizations improve their condition and why our impact has been so significant. our clients have enjoyed on average 30-to-1 return on investment. So when they invest in us, they have gained a 30-fold return on that investment. That's a $30 improvement in our client's condition for every dollar invested. Now, of course, we'd love to have the same impact for you and your team. So look, there are 4 great ways to work together. And when you're ready, there are some ways that we can help. So first is speaking. Look, myself and all of my colleagues at Strategic Leaders Academy are professional keynote speakers on leadership, culture, and strategy. I've spoken to businesses, NFL teams, academic audiences, government, nonprofit, and military. And I always tailor the audience tailor the message to the audience so the message is relevant. I'm a professional member of the National Speakers Association, which means I have a proven track record of professionalism and performance. So if you're looking for somebody to engage, excite, and educate a crowd in a highly interactive session, I'm ready to serve. Next is training. I teach teams and organizations on a range of leadership, culture, and strategy themes to include things like how to elevate your team's performance, how to build a culture of excellence, how to slash employee burnout and turnover, how to develop a winning strategy, and how to prevent expensive mistakes. These programs range from half-a-day primers to 3-day intensives. Now, we also have a suite of online self-directed courses which work well when teams are remote or can't gather in person. And they're also perfect ways to follow up on a training or workshop event so you keep your team learning at your own pace. You're constantly reinforcing. It doesn't become a one-off. You're constantly reinforcing the learning. And finally, consulting. I work with executives. I also work with organizations to help them improve their leadership skills, build a culture of excellence and trust, and create a winning strategy. I also provide strategic advising for senior leaders. So unlike the big Gucci consulting firms that are slow, often bureaucratic, and a lot of times sticky with those junior MBAs that don't know anything about leading, I personally work with you and your team so you get results quickly and cost effectively and with no hassle. So if all that sounds good to you, please use the appropriate links below. Let me move this little jobber. There you go. Please use the appropriate links below to schedule a call for a time that works with me, that works best for you. You can also choose the button at the bottom of this webinar. Okay, so here's our webinar audit. What we covered: 3 core principles of leadership: trustworthiness, respect, and stewardship. These, of course, are the foundations to leading well. We talked about 2 case studies that illustrated these principles and actions, and I also gave you a number of sort of anecdotes and examples along the way. We talked about 5 key shifts that you can make right now to apply these principles at your work that come at very little cost and will have huge impact right away. Fourth, we identified some of these key data points of low trust environments and how they affect you and your mission. And finally, we discussed some ways to working together. So I wanted to thank you for your attention in this webinar. If you love the content and you have constructive criticism, please leave your feedback in the chat room or the comments area. I'll get it and I'll respond to it. You can also email them to me at chris@strategicleadersacademy.com. That's chris@strategicleadersacademy.com. Okay, so our next webinar is going to be about empathy, which is your shortcut to C-suite commitment and cooperation. If you're frustrated that you're not getting enough time and commitment from your board, from your CEO, et cetera, empathy, this webinar is going to be for you. Again, we're going to show you practical ways to help you gain that sort of commitment and cooperation. So once again, to inquire about any ways to work together, just schedule a time on my calendar using one of those 2 links, or hit the apply button that you see on this webinar. And I look forward to talking with you soon. Otherwise, you can always email me, chris@strategicleadersacademy.com. Thanks.